Our story begins in the California desert.
10 strangers set off on a 28-day journey that will take them over 15,000 miles to 4 countries on 2 continents. Each destination brings a new test for the players.
Each test they pass adds money to a group pot that only one player will win and could grow up to $1 million.
But one of the 10 players is a mole, a double agent, working for us to sabotage the group's efforts
by preventing them from passing the tests.
No one knows who the mole is, so no one knows whom they can trust. Not all of them will complete the journey, because every few days there's a quiz about the mole, with questions like, is the mole male or female? How old is the mole? Even, what did the mole have for breakfast?
The player who scores the lowest on the quiz is executed and must leave the game immediately.
It is a simple game. Be observant, expose the mole, claim the money. Each player has a strategy, but only one will win. The one who correctly answers the question, who is the mole?
It's an amazing thing, actually.
Diversity.
Cincinnati.
This is incredible.
It got more emotional to find out like who this guy was.
Hello, this is Chuck Braverman. It's episode number 31 of Westdoc Online. Today is going to be a little different than most of the shows that we've done. As you probably know if you've been watching, all the shows have been about documentary filmmaking. And this show, and because the tool set of making documentaries is very similar to making reality shows, and there is an overlap between reality and documentary, I felt it was appropriate to have one of the leading executive producers of reality shows, and in fact, one of his reality shows is really a documentary in disguise as a reality show. But before I get to that, I just want to remind you that if you're watching this on somewhere other than www.westdoc Online, if you're watching it on YouTube or Facebook, subscribe and like and do all that stuff. So I've been a little lax in trying to get the numbers up, and I'd like to do that. But watching it on our site is fine too. So today, our guest is somebody I should probably say up front that I've known for a very long time. And he's the most, maybe, if not the most prolific, certainly one of the 2 or 3 top producers on television, maybe of all time. And I didn't even realize this when I look at his bio. He has 50 television series that he's produced. I mean, who does that? Nobody does that. That's ridiculous. He's Emmy nominated for The Mole and Brain Surge. Some of his shows are Legends of the Hidden Temple, The Man Show, The Joe Schmo Show, Loveline, Pop Stars, Shop Till You Drop. And he's introduced some people you may have heard of. He's introduced for the first time on television a young man by the name of Anderson Cooper, who you just saw, Jimmy Kimmel, Adam Carolla, Dr. Drew Pinsky, Kristen Wiig, Greg Kinnear, and a whole bunch of other people. Let's say hello to my friend, Scott Stone. Hey, Scott, how are you doing?
Hi, Chuck. I'm great. It's nice to see you again.
It's good to see you. It's funny. You're one of those incredibly successful producers that, in my opinion, and maybe I'm wrong, maybe it's because you're so successful, you seem to fly a little bit under the radar in a way. You're not in the headlines. You're not, I don't see you at a lot of trade shows. I guess maybe because you're busy out there selling shows or producing shows, or, I mean, what's the deal with you?
That's a really interesting first good question. First of all, I want to say how great it is to talk with you. You are the guy who started my career, so I'm so much in your debt for teaching me some of the fundamentals of making TV shows. To answer your question, I'm not a very social guy. I mean, I don't go out a lot. I like going out, but I don't really make it a big habit. And I went to every NatB for 24 years and kind of got blown out on that. And that was enough for me. So I don't do a lot of trade shows. And I've sort of changed the way I do business now. I kind of do the shows that I'm excited about. And it's a luxury to have. And I'm really lucky. And I've had a long, fun career. And now that I have kids that are teenagers and about to get out of the house, I'm just really focused on the stuff I love to do. Although you brought up one of them, and I think we're going to talk about later that I kind of rather forget. But the short answer to that question is I do fly below the radar. Maybe you could ask my agents. I don't know why. I like to just do shows.
What was the question that you would rather forget? Which I have to ask before I forget.
No. The show that you brought up a show earlier, you said you might show a clip of one of my shows that I did about 10 years ago that I kind of would rather forget. But okay. There are a few of them. In the 50 I've done, and by the way, that includes specials and things. So it's not, I haven't done 50 series and specials. It's a lot of TV. There got to be some bombs in there. You picked one of them.
I did. It didn't seem that way to me. It certainly isn't The Mole. Why don't we talk about The Mole for a minute? Because when you resurfaced to my seeing you out there, I mean, you disappeared for a while because you were, I know you can, after working for me, I guess you went to work for what was then called Telepictures, which became Lorimar. And
Right.
so you kind of disappeared for years. And then the next thing I know, you have this incredibly successful series on. I actually, because I obviously hadn't seen it in a while, when we ran the clip, I forgot that Anderson Cooper was the host. And how did you find it? I mean, where did he come from?
It's a fun story. Actually, he was recommended to us by the network, so I can't take full credit for picking him. But I was the one that finally said, yes, he's the right guy. We were looking for somebody kind of Tom Cruise-ish, who looked great, looked like a spy, and could be a spy. And he was doing ABC overnight news at the time, so no one was watching him, although he was doing news every single night. And he wanted out. And he is, if you know anything about Anderson, he loves social media and he loves being on the cutting edge. And he was kind of the millennial choice before anybody was talking about millennials. It was a risky choice because no one had ever heard of him, but the network was behind it and ABC pushed him. And I am so thrilled to have had the couple of years we had with him. He was great, smart, funny, capable, just a blast to work with, had no problems. One night, at some point, I'll tell you the story about how I almost killed all of us one night in Spain, but driving at 2:00 in the morning, but we made it through, and I couldn't be more excited for him. He's such a good guy. But The Mole's been, it was a great experience, and I love the show, and we're still talking about that. Every time I go somewhere, I hear about two shows. That show and Legends of the Hidden Temple. And you probably don't even know that show. It was on Nickelodeon for 14 years. Although I do remember, I kept tabs on you because at one point I think I hired you, which is one of my great joys in life, to direct an episode of Freddy's Nightmares when I did that, the Freddy's Nightmares, Nightmare on Elm Street series. You remember that?
Oh, of course. Of course. That was a joy to do. As a matter of fact, I was on the set of the original movie set of Freddy's, what was it called? Was it called Freddy's?
Nightmare on Elm Street.
Nightmare on Elm Street. Sarah Risher was executive producer of
Right.
that, worked for Bob Shea. And I was friends with Sarah, and she was in LA for a change. And she said, well, come down, we're making this movie. And I went down there, and I think, as I recall, they had this set on a gimbal or something like that. And I thought, gee, this is really silly. Who's going to ever go see this movie? That no one will ever hear of this, right?
Right.
So whatever happened to
Put a new line on the map.
Yeah, and one of the great pictures I have of I think of Alex, my older kid, is with Freddie in makeup on the set, sitting and saying hello, and of course he showed that all
Robert
around
Englund.
to all his friends. Yeah. So when you came to me, were you going to USC at the time as a student, or this is before or after you had graduated?
I was thinking about this in the shower this morning. I was 18 when I met you. I was fresh, literally off the boat car that I drove out here from Indiana. And I was a freshman at USC, and someone knew somebody that knew you and put me in touch. So we have that kind of early connection and then the USC connection. And I ended up working for you this summer between my freshman and sophomore year, and then never quit. So I just stayed with you for about 1.5 years, 2 years, continually trying to weasel my way into one show or the other. And then I almost flunked out of school thanks to you, because it was so much more fun working than I was going to school, that I had to ultimately quit just so I wouldn't flunk out, frankly. And I went back and graduated, and then you gave me my first job out of school in show business, working as a assistant editor, PA. And then, as I recall, we did the Big Laugh Off, and you sent me out all over the country looking for comedy clubs to do it in. I learned more on that trip than I did anything else. You just sent me all by myself. I must have been, 20 years old, 21.
You know, it's funny as we look back on our careers, the Big Laugh Off to me was one of the most enjoyable, most fun. You think sometimes, gee, I'm getting paid to go sit in a comedy club and watch comics that people never heard of, that we put on television, like
Robin Williams, right? Ellen DeGeneres.
Jerry Seinfeld. And
Jerry Seinfeld, right?
And Eddie Murphy and
Larry Miller was one of my faves.
And Larry. Well, it's funny. I mean, I don't want this whole show to develop about our old times, except that it was Larry Miller and Jerry Seinfeld, after we did the New York Laugh Off, called me and said, "Hey, we're coming to L.A. Can you help us?" And they both came out to my house at the time, and we had dinner. And they said, Jerry said, "I need an agent. What do I do?" And I said, "Get yourself booked into the Comedy Store, the Improv. I'll have my agent come over." And it was Marty Klein at APA at the time. And they booked Jerry and got him his first job. And actually, they signed Jerry. And I said, "Don't get too excited. This is going to be a process. It'll take a long time, have a thick skin." He went out on his first interview and got a sitcom that he was on for a year. So he went from making $25 a night to $7,500 a week or something like that, just like that. And I try to remind him if I ever see him about that.
Well, you said, you talked so nicely about the people that I've discovered, although I don't consider discovering. They create their own talent. But those people that were on those shows were so successful. I remember distinctly that Robin Williams came in second, not first.
What was the first, you went from working with me in a bunch of shows, and then you worked at Telepictures / Lorimar and did a bunch of shows. But then when you left there, what was your first show that you were on the line and you were responsible for, and what was that like?
Well, that's the short version of a much longer story. Is Lorimar Telepictures got bought by Time Warner, and I've always been an entrepreneur, and we were an entrepreneurial company, and then we became this giant organization, and I just decided to try it on my own. Again, it was the second time I'd started a company. I actually started one right after I left you, and it failed miserably. So I took with me Freddy's Nightmares, which I had been developing at Lorimar Telepictures, and I took a show called Funhouse that I did for syndication, a kids game show. So on one hand, I had this horror anthology series scripted. On the other hand, I had this kids game show. with J.D. Roth, and it was great. I was totally schizophrenic for 3 years.
But do you remember like the walking out on the set or location the first time and thinking, oh my gosh, this is my show that I'm responsible for? Or had you done that so many times before with Lorimar that it didn't feel like that big of a deal? I mean, it's different when you're somebody's employee than when it's your own show and the clock, the meter is running, and any disaster is your responsibility, right?
I think I was just either naive or dumb enough to just take a stab at it. And I figured, what's the worst they can do? There's no debtor prison in America. I'll just figure it out. And when I explain to people that I have two jobs, one is convince other people to give me their money so I can make a TV show. And then the other job is to not spend all the money they give me so I can actually spend some on my family. That's the business side of it. The other side, which is the driving force, is I really do believe that the show that I'm selling is a great idea. So I don't think I ever thought about it. I do think that I was worried about it. And I just think I figured if I didn't do it, I'd figure out something else to do. I teach this at USC now. And the first thing I teach them the very first day of class and then remind them every single day is that if you can do anything else, you should do it, because you got to be a little crazy to do this business, and you'll give up if you aren't a little crazy. And I remind them of that. And some of my students are coming back now 10 years later going, oh, now I get what you mean.
With 50 series or shows that you've sold successfully or gotten on the air, you've already said that you have to be passionate about the show, but what is the secret sauce? What is your secret to selling 50 shows?
I don't know that I have a secret sauce, but I did learn something from a guy who ran sales at Telepictures all those years ago, a guy named Dick Robertson. Did you ever meet him?
No, I don't think so.
Dick was one of the best salespeople I ever met. And my dad was a salesman, so I kind of recognized this behavior. And he put it into this language, and I never realized what it meant until I thought about it. So when he goes in to sell something, he thinks of himself as having a shirt with 2 pockets on it. And he puts 10 beans into one pocket. And he walks into the meeting and he starts explaining whatever he's selling. And the first time someone says no, he takes a bean out of this pocket and, in his mind, metaphorically, and puts it into this pocket and starts all over again. And in a different way, comes up with a new way to present basically the same idea. And he keeps going until either he sells it or all these beans are out of this pocket and in this pocket. And then he leaves. And usually by the time you get through 10 different ways of figuring out how to express to someone you feel that strongly about what it is that you're selling them, usually you get something. Whether you get what you want or not is a different story. But I think there's every story I've ever heard about this business is that kind of stick-to-itiveness, where you really do believe that the show you have is going to be successful. And look, if 10% of them are successful, that's a good career.
Well, you certainly have a number of shows that are unique and attract eyeballs, that's for sure. Let's take a look at a clip from another show that I want to talk about, and we'll come right back.
Welcome to New York, my city. Meet Kathy, a rich single woman who needs my help
I'm 40 years old. Are these guys seriously interested in dating me?
to find a younger lover. I picked 6 young men for her to try.
Whatever you want me to play, I'll play.
Ooh.
Everything Kathy Doll said she wants in a man, I have.
He uses the term gentleman, but he has no idea what it means.
Sometimes I play by the rules and sometimes I don't.
Right now, if you had to make a decision, whom would you choose?
Only the suitors who get my approval will stay.
Please go over yourself. Get some balls.
One by one, I throw them out of the bedroom.
You are not desired.
Before I weed out the good from the bad.
Do you really want to be with Kathy?
or you want to move out of your parents' house. I will test their passion, stamina, and motives.
The fact that Kathy has millions of dollars is very, very enticing.
She's a hot little mama. Chili pepper hot.
Until only one is left. Who will be desired? Don't cry.
This is too
That was the one I was talking about earlier.
Oh, well, it's funny because I don't think that show is a bomb at all. It's formulaic, but this seems to me, obviously this is an older show. This must have preceded The Bachelor, and it seems like it's that sort of formula in a different reverse way, right?
It didn't. It was 2004, I think, or 2005. We shot that show, so it was after The Bachelor, just a little bit though. And The Apprentice was very popular, so this was kind of like the anti-Donald Trump. And I don't get me wrong, I loved doing the show. It was a great experience. I particularly have a fondness for Ivana. She's fascinating and interesting, and I like spending time with her. And I spoke with her recently, right after D. Donald, as she would call him, got elected. The show was originally sold to Fox, and it was supposed to be a certain kind of show. And then after I sold it, they decided they didn't really want it. So I ended up selling it to Oxygen. So it kind of had multiple parents, and it was a crazy idea. And it could have been great. I mean, it could have really been kind of mind-blowing, but it ended up just being okay.
Well, I certainly couldn't tell from that clip, but it seemed very compelling to me. What do you have any? I mean, this is a question. I mean, here's how compelling it was. Enough that I remembered and wanted to ask you, what happened to that woman who was then the 40-year-old? Do you have any idea? And what happened to
Kathy?
the
Yeah, I'm one of those few reality producers that actually stays in touch with people that are on their shows. Like, there's one guy in The Mole in that clip you showed that I'm still friendly with 20 years later. I saw him last time I was in New York. So Kathy and I stayed in touch for quite a bit. She did date a couple of those guys for a while. She ended up not getting with either one of them, and she got remarried. And she's a really lovely, lovely woman. The reason why I think the show didn't work is because, I've only done a couple of can I curse on this, by the way?
Sure.
Okay, so there's a term of art in the reality business called a shit show. The first shit show is probably Jersey Shore, where people are getting drunk and doing crazy things. I'm not personally very good at shit shows because I have a lot of empathy for them, so I don't want to push them too far. So if this had been a shit show, it probably would have been pretty successful. I just couldn't do it. And she was such a nice woman, Kathy, that I just kind of was hoping she'd find somebody great. And these shows aren't really about finding somebody great. They're about telling a story that is really much more about telling a fantasy that viewers want to watch, just like a scripted show. You're selling fantasy, you're not selling reality. So even though we call them reality shows, that's a complete misnomer. We are selling fantasy just like anybody else.
What a shock, Scott.
Now, I'll tell you, I did a show called NYC Prep about prep schools in New York and kids in high school. That show is a lot closer to the truth than I think people want to even know. It was very popular. It only went one season and out. I think it could have gone for a very long time. But we were responsible for all of the private schools in New York changing their contracts to say that if you decide to do a reality show, we can throw you out of school. So it was really hard to pull that show off.
Was that something you're proud of? That's amazing.
Did they change their contracts?
Yeah, that's an amazing.
No, it was the last shit show I ever did, and I would never do another one. I honestly, I don't like the idea of getting woken up. I don't mind working till 2 o'clock in the morning. I don't want to get woken up by my lawyer at 2 o'clock in the morning saying I've got a problem.
Maybe we should switch subjects for a minute and talk about our common alma mater, USC, which has had a lot of bad press lately, unfortunately. And you and I both know it's a great, wonderful university on many, many levels. And it's done great things for many people, including you and me. And we both, as much as we may like other schools also, as a matter of fact, I teach at, or have been teaching at CSUN, Cal State University of Northridge lately, in a film class, and really enjoyed it. And taught at USC too for a while. But tell me a little bit about what is your connection to USC, and what kind of a class are you teaching there, and what is that experience for you as a producer?
Sure. It's kind of poignant, actually, because in a very lovely coincidence, John Singleton was somewhat responsible for the fact that I teach there. And with his passing this last couple weeks ago, it brought up that relationship with him, which is one of the nice things about USC is it puts you together with an entirely different group of people in our same business. But let me go back one step and say, the film school has been relatively unscathed in all this, so I'm very proud of Dean Daly and the fact that she's been able to stay above the fray and the ridiculousness that is the rest of the university. And I don't think I can add anything that hasn't been in the LA Times about that part. But I can tell you the film school is such a special place, although be it much bigger than when you and I were there. I think we had a class of 50 students. Now the classes are 400 or 500, I think. I was on a board. I went to a meeting. Every year we'd have the same meeting, and every year the dean would ask, what aren't we teaching? And, you know, Jay Roach would say, how about if we do digital storyboarding? And another, John Wells would talk about, maybe we need to teach writing for television. All of the things that they have done, this is now going back about 20 years. And I started saying, I think we ought to teach reality TV. We're teaching TV. It's going to be a big part of TV. It's never going away. And they would laugh at me. I mean, literally laugh out loud, like, ha, 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 and thank you very much. And then give me a hard time about taking jobs away from people that were in scripted TV. And after about 5 or 6 years of saying the same thing over and over again, I said it one year, and John Singleton, who was sitting to my right, said, oh, that reminds me. I know this the family in the Valley, and they're like a Persian family that's in the porn business, and I think they'd make a great reality show. Remind me to talk to you about it after class, after the meeting. So the dean looked at me, and she looked at John, and she said, okay, I guess it's time for us to start teaching that, and you're going to teach it. Now, I've never taught a day in my life, and I know nothing about teaching, and I was like, great. So they'll send me to class, they'll give me a book, they'll give me a mentor, somebody to teach me how to teach. And the dean said, no, that's really not the way it works here. When we do something new like this, we'll find students that want to be adventuresome, and we'll give you a semester, and you can work on your curriculum and see what you can do. So I started teaching. I showed up in a room with 9 graduate students, all of who had to take a TV class, and were delaying the decision until the last of their semesters in college. And they took my class thinking it'd be really easy, and then I kicked their butt. And we literally create and develop and pitch reality show ideas in a semester. And they're all their ideas. So I just finished doing, I think, my 10th year. And one of my students developed a show that I love. It's actually more a documentary about following, he's a DACA kid, and he developed a show about following 5 illegal or undocumented Americans, people in America, who are about to be deported the month before they're forced to leave the country, and then following them back to their home country. And I thought, wow, we have come so far from developing an Ivana Young Man kind of show, or a Kardashian show, or a Who Wants to Be a Millionaire show. Now we're really developing substantive television that could be kind of cool. So it's come a long way, but it's great. I love teaching.
Well, that's a pretty good transition to the next clip, which is what I was saying before about the overlap in the tool set between reality filmmaking and documentary filmmaking. Let's take a look at this very short clip, and then we can talk about how it came about.
Earn a win and a bounce back weekend, 55-35. Despite winning by 20 and improving their record to 3-1, the Noles gave up 21 second-half points and are in no mood to celebrate.
Hey, listen up, yo. I ain't settling for that. How we beat them? It was a dog fight to the end. A lot of work to do, man. Okay, we won. What we gonna do? We gonna go settle for that? All right, we won. For real, man. Don't settle for that. No, I ain't.
All right, everybody up.
Everybody up.
Get on the knee. Start listening. We let up. They should never have stopped us one drive. Your focus and your dedication. If you don't want to pay that price, don't play at Florida State. You play the damn game. And you don't let somebody get off the mat. We got to start being accountable to each other. Have some damn pride. You got a hell of a damn football team, but you won't let yourself do it. You made a lot of progress, but we got a lot to go. I'm proud of you. I love you. But I'm being honest with you. You stop you. Nobody else does. A lot of people can't say that. You stop you. Quit.
How did that show come about? And is that the first in the series? Because I'm going to really embarrass you in a minute about another episode of that series.
That was the second season. We did the first season with Notre Dame, which is
that's the part
kind of
that
embarrassing as a Trojan.
That's the part that I was going to say. WTF, Scott?
Yeah. Right. Hello. Well, you know what's really funny about that is the film school called me wanting a poster of one of my shows to put up in the Zemeckis Center at SC. So I said, you're going to laugh about this, but I'd like to send you a poster of Notre Dame, of a season of Notre Dame football. And they said, okay, great. Why? And I said, because I'm pissed that I can't get USC to do the show with me because they've still not said yes. I created that show. It came to me through a young guy that worked with me, who was my assistant, then became my development exec, whose brother is in the college football world. And you know, as a Trojan, you kind of have to love college football. So I've always loved college football. And he said, I think we can do a quick turnaround, kind of hard knocks type show about college football. And I said, it's all about access. If you can't get the access, you can't do it. And what school is going to give us that kind of access? So he spent the better part of 3 years working through his brother and his connections, and finally got the University of Miami to agree to do the show. So we had it, and I won't take a show out unless I know it's signed on the dotted line. So we had to sign contract with the university saying they would do it. And then we took it around, and Showtime was really interested and wanted to do the show. And I thought, wow, terrific. We can do the show I've always wanted to do, which is inside. Not the story of college football you hear on ESPN, but what happens after they lose and how do the kids deal with that and going to school, and just so much story there. And so we sold the show, and then Miami backed out. And the next year we went back with a different team with Florida State, and then Florida State backed out because Jimbo Fisher was getting divorced. And I had a very quick moment, and somebody said Notre Dame might be interested. And we flew to South Bend with the people from Showtime and convinced them to do the show. I walked out the door, and my producer stayed with the coach and the people from Notre Dame. They said, there's one rule that we have that you have to follow, and that is no Trojans allowed on the show. So I was like, he told me this after the fact. I'm like, are you kidding me? That's the only thing they said. They said, yeah, no Trojans allowed on the show. So I didn't tell them because I wasn't in the room when they said it. So I didn't feel like I committed that. Plus I know me, didn't hire any other Trojans. We're in the middle of the season, and it's the USC Notre Dame game, and it's on the field in South Bend. And I am on the field with my Notre Dame hat on and my Notre Dame garb on the Notre Dame side. And I walk over to the USC side, and the president of the USC at the time, Max Nikias, comes up and shakes my hand and says, what's going on? And I explained to him how pissed off I was that I wasn't able to convince USC to let me do the show. At that time, Sarkisian was the coach. And we laughed, and then I walked back to the Notre Dame side, and the guy who was in charge of the show said, that's a pretty good trick you've been pulling on us for the last 8 months, and was busted at that game. But by that point, we'd all fallen in love with each other. I have a lot of good friends at Notre Dame. I'm from Indiana. So it was great to do it. But yes, you are right when you look at this show and you say, this is a pure documentary. We literally followed the team. We did ask if we could go to class with certain people, and just like you would if you were doing a straight documentary. We asked if we could follow certain characters. We had an awful lot of hurdles to overcome with the university and every department at the university. But once we did it once, then we knew we could do it more than that.
To put it in context, maybe to those that don't understand, what happens when you go to USC the first week, I think they come into your room in the middle of the night and they inject you with some USC special fluid that makes you a USC Trojan for life.
Right.
And
I'm looking at, oh, here, wait a second. Oh. There it is. My Tommy Trojan.
That's great. And is that for being on the
Yes.
board, or what is that from?
No. It's from not having, not sleeping. Over the years, I have volunteered quite a bit of my time. This particular award is actually for my career, I should say that. I have another one that's about the time that I spend down there. This one was what's called the Merit Award from the Alumni Association for I don't know, for what I do for USC by talking about it all the time. So thank you for giving me that shot to keep talking about the Trojan family. It is weird though. I mean, I would never have said, if you'd asked me when I was growing up in Indiana, if A, I would move to California, B, I'd be in the TV business, and C, I would be that committed to my university, I would have said wrong to all three of them.
Well, Scott, it's been a fabulous pleasure seeing you again and having you on Westdoc Online, and I wish you the best of luck and at least 50 more series I'll expect to see from you in the next few years.
I'm gotten to the point where I need my sleep now. Thank you, and if I may take a personal moment and thank you publicly for allowing me the opportunity to learn how to make TV shows at your feet and to learn a whole bunch about how to assemble a great team and to work with good people, which is really what it's all about. So thank you personally from the bottom of my heart.
Thank you, Scott Stone.
It's an amazing thing, actually.
Diversity.
Cincinnati.
This is incredible.